Yes, we are live, so we can start anytime.
Yes, Nilesh?
Yeah, it's time we can go. Yes.
Okay, great. Ikra, you can go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. Namaskar, a very good evening and welcome to SPIC MACAY Rendezvous 2020 series. My name is Ikra Shahzad and I'll be the narrator of this wonderful session today. I am a student of class 11th from Shardeen School, Muzaffarnagar. It is a matter of pleasure and honor for me as I welcome all of you here to this wonderful evening. I'd like to introduce you all to SPIC MACAY. SPIC MACAY for the Indian classic and culture amongst youth is a non-profit, non-political, voluntary global youth movement. Eminent artists and personalities from classical music, dance, folk arts, poetry, theatre, paintings, crafts, yoga, meditation, philosophy, etc. have been about 1,500 educational institutions in 850 towns internationally, impacting around 30 lakh students every year. SPICMACAY has received numerous recognitions, including Padma Shri to the founder of Professor Kiran Seth, and encouraging speeches from Honorable Vice President Sri Venkaiah Naidu, and SPICMACAY aims to reach every child in the country by 2025. Here we bring you to experts of various fields like classical and folk arts, philosophy, literature, environment, social issues, cinema, theatre, etc. through online media. Today, we are pleased to have you all for an exciting session on Western classical music. Today, we have lined up for an interaction session. We have amongst us Sunit Tandon. We welcome you, sir. On behalf of Dr. Kiran Seth and the whole SPIC community, all the viewers, from all across the country and everybody there, I'd also like to welcome everybody from the host institute, Shardeen School, Muzaffarnagar. It is a unique opportunity for me to be a part of this because Rashmi ma'am to introduce Mr. Sunit Tandon to all of us.
Thank you, Ikra. That was a very wonderful introduction to Mr. Sunit Tandon. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Sheridan School for coming on board as host of this wonderful series that SPICMACAY is starting, lecture come demonstration series, and today is the first of its kind being inaugurated by Mr. Sunit Tandon. You've already heard a lot about Mr. Sunit Tandon, but I'd like to add a little bit about his association with SPIC MACAY. Very briefly. He has been associated with SPIC MACAY for almost 2 decades now. He is a wonderful partner and a SPIC MACAY volunteer, almost to say so. Despite being a great celebrity in his own right, he's always been there for SPIC MACAY. And Mr. Sunit Tandon, we really appreciate this at SPIC MACAY. And we are also very thankful to Mr. Ratan, the principal of Sheridan School. Unfortunately, he's traveling and he should be joining us soon. And then we're going to ask him to say a few words. Now I'm going to request Mr. Sunit Tandon to kindly take the stage and lead us through this beautiful series of lecture cum demonstration on Western classical music. Sunit, please come on board.
Thank you very much indeed, Rashmi. I'm really grateful to SPIC MACAY and to Rashmi Malik for all the collaboration that we've done over the years, for all that SPIC MACAY have been doing for spreading education and appreciation of music, particularly, and all other performing arts as well, and many other fields amongst the young people of our country and even amongst the older people. So I'm really delighted always to be associated with SPIC MACAY, and it's a great pleasure to help in this online effort to spread a little appreciation of Western classical music, which has been the field that I have been most involved with in the course of my life. Thank you very much indeed. It's a great pleasure to be here. I would like to thank Ikra also for that lovely introduction, and Nilesh, who's managing all our technicals. Thank you, Nilesh. He's doing it all from Paris. But that's the wonder of the electronic age, the digital age, when we can be wherever we are, and yet we can all be together. So I thought I'd start off this particular first program. I was told that I should actually just choose some pieces of music and we should all listen to them. And after listening to them, if any of you have any questions, we can have a dialogue and interaction about the music that you've heard and any other questions you might have. So I was wondering what to start with, and I thought that perhaps since we've just celebrated Christmas yesterday, perhaps the first piece can be about Christmas. And when I thought about Christmas, as far as Western classical is concerned, pure classical music, and not just, say carols like Silent Night, Holy Night, and all other kind of Christmas songs, which are also very beautiful in their own place. But pure classical Christmas, the first thing that comes to mind from amongst the great composers is the Christmas Oratorio written by Johann Sebastian Bach, who is one of the greatest composers of the Western classical tradition. And in fact, we are going to hear a bit of just that oratorio. It's a very long work. It lasts over 3 hours, actually, and it's in 6 parts. We are just going to hear the very first movement of the first part. So we are hearing a very small fraction of the work right now. I also want to say that I'm concentrating in this, as was suggested in this first edition, as was suggested by Rashmi Malik, on 3 great composers, Bach, Mozart, and Beethoven. They're the 3 possibly greatest composers of Western classical music, a kind of trinity of Western classical music, not unlike the trinity of our South Indian Carnatic music, which you all know about. So they are the really great ones, and we're going to start with music by all 3 of them in this session. We'll have about 40 minutes of music, and then we'll have enough time for interaction and questions and answers. So, Christmas first. Bach wrote something called the Christmas Oratorio around about 1734. That is a little under 300 years ago. So, this is a very large work, as I said. It's 3 hours long. It's in 6 different parts. Each part is about half an hour long. And each part was meant to be performed on one particular day during the Christmas season, which used to extend in those days, from 25th, which is December, which is Christmas Day, up till the 6th of January. So these 6 works would have been performed on different days during this period in the churches where Bach was employed in Germany. At that time, he was, I think, in Leipzig, which is a town in Eastern Germany. So we are going to hear just the first part of the first movement of the first work in this Christmas oratorio, which is a very long work. This is something that really I thought might attract you to it, because it's really joyful music. It's music which is really full of happiness, because he's trying to show the great joy that is being experienced by everybody when Jesus Christ is born. And the words, I'll just read out, because the text is actually in German, but the translation of that I thought I'll share with you before we start the music. The translation of this movement is, very briefly, celebrate, rejoice, rise up and praise these days, glorify what the highest has done today. Abandon despair, banish laments, sound forth full of delight and happiness. Serve the highest with glorious choruses. Let us honor the name of the supreme ruler. So it's a very happy piece, exultant, joyous, at this celebrating God and the fact that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, has been born. So let's listen to it. It's full of trumpets and drums, and I've got a performance here in which you will notice, if you have a little knowledge of Western music, that the instruments are much older looking than the instruments you see nowadays in modern orchestras. There are trumpets, there are flutes, there are oboes, there are drums, but these are the kind of instruments that Bach himself would have been familiar with. So they are historical instruments. They are like original instruments that this would have been performed on earlier. And the choir, you will notice, the choir is entirely made up in this authentic, this performance tries to be authentic to the spirit of Bach and his times. In those days, women were not allowed to sing in the church. So even the higher voice parts, the choral parts, were sung by boys, not by women. Although nowadays, a lot of people record this with women, mixed chorus of women and men. So there's a big chorus, there's an orchestra with trumpets, drums, and flutes and oboes, and they're all playing, and this joyous music is sounding out. And the chorus, even the higher parts, are boys, so it's boys and men singing only in this version. So let's listen to the first part of the first movement of the Christmas Oratorio by Johann Sebastian Bach. Nilesh, I think you can play it now. Well, I hope you enjoyed that very much. Did you get that feeling that it's really lively and happy and it's an outburst of joy? I'm sure you did. It's a very, very lovely piece and it's unforgettable once you hear it. That real explosion of rejoicing and happiness at this wonderful occasion of Christmas. Um, I was going to play you just another excerpt from this, which is just to show you difference in how it is performed. This time, the second version that I've chosen, we're just going to hear a bit of it. We're not going to hear the full piece again. Just a bit of it, just to show you that these old instruments that they were using are now replaced by modern instruments, the way these instruments look nowadays. These instruments in the recording you just saw, you saw that the flute was just like a bamboo flute. It was very close to our own basuri. The oboes were also plain wood and without any keys and so on. They were also very much close to our own shehnai. There was a big instrument called the bassoon, which was also playing. Then the drums were big drums with very hard drumsticks that were being played. And the trumpets were straight, again, without keys and valves. They were the old style trumpets that would have been found in Bach's times about 300 years ago. Now we are going to hear just a very brief bit of a performance, which is special on two counts. One is, of course, as I said, they'll be using modern instruments. So you'll see that the instruments look like the way they do in a modern orchestra, Western orchestra. The oboes have keys, the bassoons have keys, the trumpets have keys. It's a more complex instrument. It's evolved. The flutes also are metal flutes now, and they have a lot of keys also. The other special reason for playing just a bit of this recording is to show you how the traditions live on in Western music also. We are very proud in India of our Guru Shishya Parampara coming down through centuries, through thousands of years, from one Guru to the Shish to the Shish. So there are gharanas which are very old. In Western music also, there is a lot of tradition in classical music. The choir you're going to hear singing this time, that choir is actually the successor. It's the same choir of which Bach himself, the composer, was the director 300 years ago. This is the choir of the St. Thomas Church in Leipzig, in Eastern Germany. So it's the same choir for which this work was written also. So the modern day representatives of that choir will sing a bit of this. Let's hear the second excerpt. We'll hear just about 2-3 minutes of it, and then we move on to the next piece in this particular session. So Nilesh, could you play the second track now, please? Oh, just pause it for 1 minute, Nilesh. Nilesh, just pause it. Yeah, I just want to tell you, this was another one. We're going to have 2 more excerpts. This particular excerpt is showing you how women are singing instead of the boys. Okay, so we'll hear a bit of it, just about 2-3 minutes, but you'll see that instead of the boys, it's women who are singing the upper parts. Although the instruments being used here are again like the old instruments, not the new instruments, not the modern instruments. We'll just hear a bit of it just to show you the contrast and how every performance, because Western music is written down, every single part that is being sung by all those hundreds of people or being played by those instruments is written down. So every performance is like different in the way in which it is interpreted. You'll find this interpretation is a little different. And as I said, the upper vocal parts are being sung by women, not by boys. Let's just hear a bit of it just to get the difference in the sound for this approach. And then we'll go to the St. Thomas Church Choir, which is the choir which Bach used to conduct himself. Just a little bit of this. Please, Nilesh, play this, and I'll tell you when to stop. So you saw that this time again, the instruments were still old, but it was women and men singing. The women were singing the higher parts, not the boys. So, and this was a slightly more energetic and more emphatic kind of interpretation. Let's now turn to the third interpretation of the same piece. I will just hear a little bit of it before we move on to the next piece of music. And this, as I said, I'm playing for historical reasons. One is you'll notice that the instruments in this version are modern instruments. And the second, the choir is the same choir which used to be conducted by the composer himself almost 300 years ago. Let's listen to the third version of the same piece, Jauchzet frohlocket, from Bach's Christmas Oratorio. Nilesh, you could play the third. So you saw there. Now this is the choir. It's a successor. I mean, of course, the kids change with every generation and every few years, and the men also change. But this is the same choir in the same church where Bach used to work almost 300 years ago. So the tradition is there, but you saw the instruments were very different. The trumpets were now lots of keys. The flutes were metal flutes. The oboes also had lots of keys. So these were modern instruments, the way they have evolved over the centuries. Whereas in the other two recordings, we saw the instruments as they used to be in Bach's time. So they have a slightly different sound, and that's much appreciated. In recent years, there have been lots and lots of groups which specialize in performing music of old times on instruments which are like they used to be in those times. So that is a very, very great movement in Western classical music these days. Now let's move on to another composer. We've heard a Christmas piece by one of the great pillars of Western music, Johann Sebastian Bach. Let's move on to, again, it's religious music, but not specifically Christmas music. Because you must know that much of the oldest music in the Western tradition was associated with the church. And there's lots of music which is outside the church also, which is secular music. There's lots of that as well. But since we started off with church music, I thought in this particular session, we'd stick to the church music only. And we take examples of church music, and some of it would be also choral music, which sounds a bit from the church tradition, but enters the secular realm also. That will be right at the end. Right now, let's move now to the other great pillar of Western music, Mozart, whom you all know about. Mozart was born about 6 years after Bach died. So he's from a different generation, and his musical style was also very different. But he could, because he studied the music of Bach and Handel, earlier composers, he could also write music in their styles, so to speak. He could imitate their styles. He had a very great understanding of it because he was a complete genius and he could really adapt himself to any kind of music he came across. We're going to hear a work which is deeply religious, and I've chosen it because it also captures something which Western music seems to lack otherwise, especially their religious music. But in Mozart, I find that bhav, that expression, quite a bit in this work particularly. And that is the bhakti bhav. While it is one thing to praise God loudly or to sing about God's wonders, it's another thing to do it with the kind of vileen bhakti bhav. And that kind of writing in religious music in the Western classical tradition, which we can empathize with, I find in Mozart, particularly in this work, which I'm going to play a bit of, which is the Great Mass in C minor. Mozart started writing this work to celebrate his marriage. He went through a difficult time to get married to the woman he loved. And he wanted to give this work as an offering. And he took it with him when he went back to his hometown, Salzburg, from Vienna. He had got married in Vienna. And his own wife, in fact, sang when it was bits of this work were performed in Salzburg. I keep saying bits of the work because actually Mozart never managed to finish it. But the bits that are there are so great that it's considered one of the greatest works of Western classical music. We are going to hear one bit which was absolutely completed by Mozart, which is the opening movement. Now, the Mass in Catholic music is a standard text. Every Mass written by every composer over the hundreds and hundreds of years has the same text. It's in Latin, and it's a set text which is used in prayer in the Latin church, in the Roman Catholic Church. Each composer, however, gives their own expression to it. And Mozart brings a very unique expression, I think, in this. You might be able to catch it if I tell you what it's about. The first section of every Catholic Mass is known as the Kyrie. There are only 3 lines in it, of which one is a repetition. The first line is simply Kyrie eleison. The second line is Christe eleison. And the third line is again Kyrie eleison. Every Roman Catholic Mass starts with this. If they do it in Latin or if they do it in English, I'll give you the English translation. The first line is, Lord, have mercy upon us. The second line is Christe eleison, which means Christ, have mercy upon us. And then again, the third line is again, Lord, have mercy upon us. Okay, so these are the 3 lines which open the Roman Catholic Mass. Every single Mass, even if they don't sing the Mass, if the Mass is said by the priest, then it is these 3 lines with which you open the Mass. Mozart sets it in a very unique way, which I find really no other composer has done. When he is setting the first line, Lord have mercy upon us, meaning God have mercy upon us, it's like a huge mass of suffering humanity is praying in darkness for mercy. It's music which is very dark and almost, like pleading, please have mercy on us. We are suffering. You can hear the suffering in the music, and the whole choir is singing it. It's very dark music. And then suddenly a light starts shining and the music graduates. It dies away, the suffering, and suddenly we shift like the rag. We shift into another rag, from the minor rag to the major rag. And a solo voice of a woman rises up and she sings, Christ have mercy upon us. Because with Christ, you can have a personal connection because Christ is human after all. He became human, right? So just as we have in our traditions, when we look at Krishna, we have a lot of love for Krishna. We have bhakti for Krishna because we can associate with Krishna because he's like us. He has all the loveliness and the faults also and the mischievousness of human beings. So suddenly, when she appeals to Christ, it is a very personal appeal, and as if there's a lot of hope now. Earlier, it was like hopelessness, but pleading. Now, when she sings to Christ directly, it's full of light and hope and a very bhakti, vileen kind of bhav. She sings long phrases saying, you know, Christ have mercy on us. And then, of course, it has to go back to God. The last line, God have mercy on us, Lord have mercy on us. And then the chorus again comes back with the dark music in the beginning. So it's a very lovely depiction of the contrast between appealing to an impersonal God and a personal Christ who's a personal God. In this, the way Mozart sets it, and no other composer has set the Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison like this. So let's listen to the Kyrie, the first movement of Mozart's great Mass in C minor. Nilesh, you could play it, please. So, did you get that contrast between when the crowd is appealing to God and when the solo voice is appealing to Christ? And then the crowd comes back and appeals to God again. It's a very, very beautiful, very dramatic movement, but I think you can really feel that bhakti bhav in when the solo soprano, the lady, is singing. You know? It's like bhakti. She's vileen in it completely and appealing to Christ. So that's a very Indian kind of bhav or a ras, which you don't often find in Western classical music. There is another movement in this mass, which is purely bhakti bhav, I think, but I don't have time to play it just now. Again, it's a solo soprano singing absolutely vileen, thinking about the magic of Christ becoming human. The whole point is when Christ becomes human, जब निर्गुण से सगुण हो जाते हैं ना भगवान, that is when the real bhakti bhav comes. And that is a movement in a mass by Mozart, which is written in the Roman Catholic religion, which actually captures that so beautifully, and which I don't feel any other composer in the Western tradition has really captured that feeling at all. So I'm making a very loud statement and a very broad statement, but coming from our perspective, where we have so much exposure to Bhakti Sangeet, we can understand that feeling. Okay, so now it's time to move on to another piece. Again, I'm going to go to a piece by Mozart, which is going to lead into our final piece, which is a long piece by Beethoven. Everybody, I think, will have heard at least the tune of the Ode to Joy, the famous tune which Beethoven uses in his last symphony, which is a choral symphony. Normally, symphonies were written only for orchestra without any voices. But in his ninth symphony, Beethoven, for the first time, incorporated voices also, like in the church music we've heard so far. But in his case, it was a secular religion. This was a religion of brotherhood of mankind. And the Ode to Joy is celebrating the brotherhood, equality, and fraternity of mankind, somewhat inspired by the ideals of the French Revolution, perhaps. But that famous tune, which has now been adopted as the national anthem of the European Union, you must have heard it. It's used in ringtones and phones and all also. There is a work by Mozart which he wrote when he was 19 years old, where that tune is also foreshadowed. So it's a church work by Mozart. It's a very short work. It's only about 6.5 minutes long. And he wrote it to show off his contrapuntal writing skills. Now, contrapuntal, what does that mean? In Indian music, you don't have counterpoint or contrapuntal music. But it is very, you must have noticed in all this music here that it's not just one voice singing most of the time. There are lots of voices, and they're all singing different notes, but they're combining. And sometimes they're playing against each other. You know, different tunes are playing against each other or combining and not combining. That is called counterpoint. That is, there are many layers of melodies going on, combining and recombining with each other. And you've got to really listen very carefully and many times to really understand what counterpoint is trying to do at any point of time. So it's a very complex thing. I don't want you to do that immediately if you're not used to it. But listen to this work where he's trying to show off many different kinds of counterpoint, contrasting with the point where there's only one melody. And in this work, on the violins, like 1 or 2 minutes into the piece, you will find a tune which is very similar to the tune used by Beethoven later as the Ode to Joy. So it's a precursor. We are leading into it. So let's listen to this very short work by Mozart for the church. It's called Misericordias Domini. It's got very simple words, again in Latin, which was the language used in the Roman Catholic Church at that time. They did not allow local language to be used. They allowed only the Latin to be used for their church services. Just as we, for our mantras and our yajnas and our havans, we like to have Sanskrit. So they used to use Latin. And in that, the words of this are very simple. It's Misericordias Domini cantabo in aeternum. This is in Latin. All it means is the whole work has got just these words. It keeps repeating the words. As we do in our classical music also, we keep repeating the same words. They also do the same. So meaning in English of this is, of the Lord's mercies, I will sing forever. So of the Lord's mercies, I will sing forever. So of the Lord's mercies, that section, Mozart sets it like a kind of refrain in between. And then when he gets the part, I will sing forever, then he sings it in different styles, different kinds of counterpoint styles. So you will hear it in that form. And in between, you get that tune on the violins only, which is, you know, a precursor to the tune which Beethoven used for his 9th symphony. Let's listen to Misericordias Domini, a work which Mozart wrote when he was 19 years old. Nilesh?
So you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, I thought I had unmuted myself. So it was a very short work there by Mozart. I hope you enjoyed that. And it showed off a very different range of styles that he could write in even at that young age. That tune you may have caught. Now we are going to see and listen to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the third of the three large pillars of Western music. His great Ninth Symphony, one of the greatest achievements of all Western music, which he wrote in 1824. So about, 200 years ago. This work is a very large work. It's got 4 movements, but we are going to hear just the last part of the last movement. Now, the last movement itself is about 25 minutes long. We are going to hear only the part when the chorus comes in, from that part onwards, which is about 18 minutes long. So, because the first part of that movement also has only orchestra, and then suddenly the chorus comes in at the end for just the last section of the work. And you will hear that famous tune in a slightly different version, which Beethoven used in this symphony, which has become a very, very, very well-known tune, and which is the tune which is also the anthem of the European Union these days. So I think you'll find that it's a large orchestra now, unlike that piece where you had a larger choir but a very small orchestra. Earlier we had large orchestra and large choir. Now we have again a very large orchestra and a very large choir. And we also have soloists who are singing, as they were in the Mozart piece also. There was one woman you heard. There are other soloists in that work also who sing solo also, apart from the choir. So in this also there are soloists and choir and a very large orchestra. So let's listen to the last bit of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with the choir, the choral symphony as it's also known. And I'm sure you'll enjoy the music. It's very, very rousing music, music celebrating the brotherhood of mankind and the joys of being together as human beings, of being equal human beings. So I think we can just go over to the music now and listen to this very, very great work also. Thank you very much, Nilesh. You could play it.
Sondern lasst uns angenehmere anstimmen und freudenvollere. Freude schöner Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium. Wir betreten feuertrunken, himmlische dein Heiligtum. Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mode streng geteilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfter Flügel weilt. Freund zu sein, wie ein holdes recht geplant. Laufet, Brüder, eure Bahn, laufet, Brüder, eure Bahn. Freu dich wie ein Held zum Siegen, wie ein Held zum Siegen. Laufet, Brüder, eure Bahn. Wie ein Held zum Siegen.
Well, there you are. I hope you enjoyed that performance of the last part of the Ninth Symphony by Beethoven, a great landmark in the history of Western classical music. And you must have noticed the way it kept changing its pace, its tempo, and it had so many different solo voices singing. Then the full orchestra would come in, and it would become soft and become loud. So a huge range of emotions being depicted in that wonderful piece. I hope you enjoyed all of this, and now I'm ready to take any questions or any interaction that all of you would like to have. I suppose somebody will moderate this. Rashmi, will you moderate the questions and so on?
I would do that, sir. Anubha here.
I don't know if the questions are coming online or people are going to ask them directly or what.
Sir, so I would just like to request all the students to raise their hands up from the audience, and I'll call out your names, and then you can unmute yourselves and ask your question. So that would be the way we would be doing it. So I would really encourage the students to ask questions. And please raise up your hands first. So meanwhile, since the students are taking their time to ask their questions, I have a question for you personally. So, sir, 1 second, sir. Yeah, so there has been a debate. I mean, there is this ongoing debate of Indian classical music versus Western classical music. And we have seen views from each side. So could you please outline some of the constructive points for us that differentiates the two style of music?
Yeah, they're very different traditions. Both are very deep. Both require knowledge, study, concentration over years to really become masters. Both require, even from listeners, some amount of knowledge and immersion in what they are about. And they are the two great classical traditions of the world. I mean, I'm counting both Carnatic and Hindustani as our own tradition because they have too many similarities compared to Western music. And Western music is another tradition. I don't think that the other cultures have music, and some much of it is quite classical, or what we would call in the semi-classical genre, the Arabic music. There are very deep musics over there also. Some in the Far East also. But the two really developed classical traditions in the world are the Indian and the Western, frankly. But there are a lot of differences. The Indian tradition is mostly vocal oriented and instrumental as a result of that also. But we don't believe in, we have most complex rhythmic structures. We have most complex melodic structures. The rag systems and all the shrutis that we use in our music are more complex than in Western music. Western music, over from earlier, they used to have something similar to rags called modes from Greek times. But gradually, for the last 400 years or so, 400 years, they reduced it to only two rags by and large, major and minor. Of course, in modern 20th century and 21st century music, all that also becomes very complex. It's very difficult to generalize, but what we call the classical music, the core classical music, has only two rags. But what we don't have and they have is harmony and counterpoint. We have a sort of harmonic drone that we use in the background. Tanpura jab chalta hai, you have the sa and the pancham and so on. You use that as a drone, just as a background to place your notes correctly. Whereas they have harmony and counterpoint, and they can use a number of voices singing at the same time. They can be as many as 40, 50 different melodic strands going on at the same time. Then the other difference is ours is more a received and oral tradition, received from the guru and passed on. Theirs, since the last at least 600, 700, 800 years, has been a written tradition. They write it down and they record it. Of course, many of the things in the earlier music have to be reconstructed because they couldn't write very complex stuff earlier. But by the time you come to about the 16th century, 15th century, 16th century onwards, their writing also catches up, and then they write down almost everything. It is not to say they don't have scope for improvisation. They also have scope for improvisation, but it's in a different way. Either you're doing a fully improvised piece, or there are patches in between works where you can improvise, and you're supposed to improvise. So, but mostly it's all written down. So when we say great works of great composers, it is all absolutely, each note is written down. And your expertise lies in how you bring it alive. Just as Shakespeare may have written down his plays, okay, everything is written down there. But different actors will say it differently, and different productions will have completely different meaning also. You know, it depends on how you read it out, how you act it out, how you produce it, what is the context you give. Similarly, in music also, there's a great amount of emphasis on interpretation. How do you interpret it? What is the correct way? What is not the correct way? What may be your own individual way? How do you bring your own individuality into it? So you can listen to 2 or 3 or 4 different performances of the same piece by different musicians, and you will be able to tell the difference immediately. And you can always tell who is a greater performer from a lesser performer. Immediately, you'll be able to tell when you compare and contrast, and where you're vibing more. And some may be more to your taste, some may be more to somebody else's taste. So there's a matter of your own taste also comes into it. So basically, these are the differences. I don't think there are any other very major things that I can emphasize in this kind of forum. This is the main. These are the main differences that I would emphasize. But as I said, both are very deep traditions requiring deep study and deep knowledge. Eventually, the more you learn, the more you realize that you don't know enough. And then you want to learn more, and then you realize, oh, I still don't know enough. And that happens with both, because they are both very, very rich classical traditions with huge traditions and huge history. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you so much for answering that, sir. So we have a few questions from the students as well. So we have a question from Shreya Sharma. So Shreya, I would like to request you to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Hello, Shreya.
So, sir, my question to you is that if you could just elaborate the difference between homophony and polyphony in both Indian classical music and Western classical music.
Okay, homophony is when you have just one tune going, like, you know, if just that tune is playing and nothing else is going above and below it, apart from maybe tanpura or something like that, then that's homophony. But when you have that going along with 100 other voices, which you heard just now, you heard so many things. When they were singing, for instance, in the Mozart Cantata in Aeternum, somebody was starting first, somebody was starting later, and they were all singing the same thing, but in different tunes and different times, and they were not coinciding exactly with each other. That's polyphony. Okay, meaning many voices. That's all it means. Polyphony means many voices. Homophony means one voice, or, you know. So that is the essential difference. In Hindustani music, polyphony is not really an element. In Hindustani or Carnatic music, it is not really used. We don't, I mean, at best we have jugalbandis, but even in jugalbandis, what you do is one plays at one time, the other plays at the other time, and if they play together, they play more or less the same thing. You know, in unison, what is known as unison in Western music, meaning the same notes at the same time. If you play the same notes at the same time, you sing the same notes at the same time, that's known as singing in unison, which is not polyphony. Polyphony is when you're singing different notes at the same time.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Sir, just one more question. That being a very fine actor and directing so many different plays, and not to forget that the vast sea of knowledge that you possess about music. So, how has playing different roles, directing plays of various genres, and coming across various fascinating pieces of music has affected your personality?
Oh, that's a very tough question. First of all, I don't think I have a sea of knowledge about Western music. I'm just a music lover, that's all. I have not studied it to any great degree. I don't have a PhD in music or anything like that. I am not a scholar at all. I just love the stuff, and I've read up about it. I know a little bit. I've heard quite a bit, and I keep following and listening. Um, everything helps you. When the music helps me. For instance, if I'm directing a play, the fact that I know music, I know what kind of music I want, because I'm exposed to a lot of music and I like it, and I do feel I can understand it a little bit, if not very much. A little bit of understanding, yes. So that helps. And when I'm doing music, for instance, I mean, if I did not love both, I would never been asked to direct operas. Operas are sung plays, they're plays with singing and orchestra and everything. And I've directed at least 3 operatic productions also. That's because I understand the music part of it also, the Western music part of it, as well as I do know a little bit about the stage also. So I can put the two together. So that is what really helps you. And it helps you in life, of course, because it expands your horizons. It gives you immense pleasure to be able to listen to music, or to be able to try and understand it. And the wide variety of music out there is just amazing. And similarly, when all the arts are interconnected. So even literature and plays and theater are interconnected. There were the movements that happened in music over time, over the centuries in Western music. There are parallels in literature also. There are parallels in the theater also. So you can see the similar sensibilities as culture evolves and changes over time. It moves in certain parallel manners in all the arts, even in the painting and sculpture and the other fine arts, the plastic arts also. So it gives you a better rounded view of a culture if you try and understand at least various aspects of their culture. Just as in India, if you understand Indian music and you understand Indian sculpture, your understanding of dance also increases, right? And music also, it increases. So many of our classical dancers take inspiration from temple sculptures and so on. So everything is allied in a culture.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the amazing questions, Shreya, and thank you for the answer. Next, we have Anushka Jain. Anushka, you can ask your question now. Please unmute yourself.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
My question to you is, sir, that why do you choose to be a part of mass communication?
Oh, I started doing broadcasting very long ago. So when I was in college, I started doing radio and television broadcasting. And so that was apart from the job which I was doing. So I kept doing it. And that at one point, mass communication started taking over my life also in many ways. But I didn't study mass communication as such. I just started by practicing. Doing radio and television. We used to have Yuvani in the old days, so I started broadcasting. I was a teenager at that time. And we used to have something called Youth Forum on Doordarshan. I started hosting that, anchoring for that. And then it just grew and grew and grew. So at a time when had already had some administrative experience also, and I had lots of experience in front of the camera and in front of the microphone in radio and television. And then they wanted somebody to head Mass Communication Institute. I said, I've done both sides, so it helped.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Anushka. So the next question is from Ojal Singhal.
Yeah.
Ojal, you can ask your question now. Please
Hi,
unmute yourself.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, apart from being wonderful in music, you have great experience in the field of public speaking. So what would be your advice to the students on how to improve their speaking skills?
I think you're already a good speaker from what I can hear. So just keep practicing and speaking in front of the public whenever you get the chance. And if you can do some recordings and so on, record some literary pieces or poetry for yourself. Every bit of practice helps. And never give up a chance to speak in public, and speak openly and be yourself when you're speaking. Enjoy what you're saying and let it flow. And slowly, if you have any kind of nervousness, slowly it'll go away. It all goes away.
Yeah, sir, because there is a lot of stage fright type of thing with a lot of people. Even with me, I get nervous a number of times.
I know, I'm telling you, I used to get very nervous when I had to speak in public. You know what I mean? Just
Yes,
myself. And I used to get nervous also if I had to be alone on stage to recite something even. But my nervousness just disappeared the first time I went onto stage to act, because there I already had a part. I had learnt my part very well. I knew I was acting somebody else. I was not me on stage. On stage, you are somebody else, right? Moment I could speak to the public as somebody else, I found I was not nervous. But when I had to speak to the people as myself, it used to make me nervous. And then slowly, because of that acting and doing a lot of theater, there not being nervous and being nervous otherwise, slowly it sort of, the nervousness started ending, because I said, okay, if I can be less nervous when I'm doing a part where I'm just acting and I'm doing all kinds of very different things which I would not do normally in real life, then it's fine. I should be able to say at least normal things to normal people in real life also. So slowly it went away, but it took some time. I used to be very, very nervous speaking in public.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Everything is practice. Just keep doing it. Everything becomes easy with practice. Everything in life.
Thank you for the question, Ojal, and thank you for the advice, sir. Indeed, practice is the most important thing in life.
That's why, may I just add to this? That's why Riyaz is so important in music. Why do musicians spend hours every day practicing? It's to improve themselves, to get overcome any problems they might have, to get better, and to keep practicing. Riyaz is the secret of doing anything well, anything at all. Never get discouraged, never get disheartened. If your heart is in it, do not allow anything to discourage you. Just carry on doing it. You may fall a few times. You may make a mistake a few times. You may embarrass yourself a few times. It doesn't matter. Get up again and do it again. And practice more. You will improve. If you put your heart and soul into it, you will improve. There's nobody who can keep you back.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. So in the interest of time, we are moving towards the last two questions. So I would like to request Vishwesh Gaur to ask his question, please.
Yeah.
You can unmute yourself.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Vishwesh.
Sir, I want to just ask you that what is the similarity between Indian music and classical, Western music and classical music, sir?
And Western music and Indian classical. Western and Indian classical music, huh?
Sir, similarity.
Yeah, similarities, as I said earlier also, I answered this, I think. But basically, it's that both are very complex and very rich legacies. They both have a lot of history behind them. And to understand them, you see, first, the way you appreciate music, any music, is you like it. It sounds good to you. Something in it you like, right? With most pop music or, the filmy music and all, you like it. There's not very much more deeper you can go into it, right? You like it, okay, you understand the music, you can sing it yourself also if you have a good voice. That's fine. That's one level of understanding and appreciating music. In both classical music, whether it's Western or Indian, there is so much more to it. What is the thought behind it? How is the music structured? How can they sing for 1.5 hours without stopping? How can they take the same rag and weave a magic out of it for a long period of time? Take 3 lines and make magic out of that for 1.5 hours. How do they do it? What is the complexity there? So how cleverly it is being used? And that's the same in Western music also. How is a work built up? What is the structure? What is the interaction between the different elements going on? You have to start appreciating that to really get into it fully. It's like one thing to taste some good food and the other thing to know how many masalas have gone, what is the cooking process that has made it as delicious as it is. If you do that wrong, then it will come out wrong. So similarly, music also is put together with the great degree of thought, complexity, and a lot of history behind it. That is when you learn to appreciate that. It gives you an even deeper pleasure than just listening to a good tune or a good song or a good rhythm and dancing to it. Yeah, I've tried to answer. I hope that helped.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer, sir. So we are moving towards the last question of the session. I would like to request Pratima ma'am to please go ahead with the question.
Hello.
Hello.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Please.
First of all, actually, I'm a volunteer. I do this type of programs for SPIC MACAY.
Wonderful.
But this is one of the beautiful programs I just heard, because we have been actually listening to the Hindustani classical music and other things. This is one of the, I mean, what I can say. It is a polyphony systems, what you have seen, that you have shown, the beautiful thing of the same tune and in different times. So I personally really thank you very much and making us listen to this type of music. And the first time I listened, I learned about that system.
I hope you enjoyed it also.
I have learned, but you explained us. That is one of the beautiful things I have. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your lovely comment. I just want to add that if you liked any of this, all of this is from YouTube. Okay. So it's all available on YouTube. You can just go and do a search on YouTube and find it. If you liked anything, listen to it at least 3, 4, 5 times.
It's very
you will slowly start appreciating it more and more and more. Okay.
So one thing I just wanted to tell you, this is just, it came in BBC News. That person who was actually in dementia, she came out listening to this song.
Yeah.
Particular thing. She was 92, but she started dancing after listening to this music.
Yeah.
So these particularly polyphony systems, what you have shown, this is in very high note. What I feel, sir. Is it not?
No.
Very high note.
Both Indian music and Western. Any kind of music has the part. Sorry?
Music therapy.
Yes.
Definitely must be having for the health system.
Yeah. Music therapy is very important, and a lot of people do use it, and it doesn't matter which system it is. Even the Indian system can be used for music therapy. It depends on what you're familiar with. That lady from that video you're talking about, she was familiar with that work because she had danced to it when she was young. That's why she responded to it. So whatever you are familiar with, you would respond to it, even if it was Indian music or whatever. Music therapy is a very something which a lot of people do try and use, and it has a valuable place also. Definitely in different
Very nice. I will definitely listen to this because you explained us that polyphony systems. After I liked it very much.
Thank you. Okay. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you
very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pratima ma'am. I would just hand over the baton back to Ikra. Ikra, you can take the program forward.
Ujasvi is not able to ask a question.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
One second, Ikra. Ujasvi, do you have a question? Okay, please go ahead.
Quickly. And there's one Shaurya also. I think Shaurya Kumar.
So now I would like to call.
Yeah, you can hear you, Ujasvi. Carry on. Speak.
So now I would like to call Honorable Director, sir.
No, wait, Ikra, wait a sec.
Just we can take one more. I think.
Good evening, sir.
There you are.
I wanted to ask that how do you feel about the influence of Western classical music as well as opera singing in India? Because it's not every day you see someone Indian, not generalizing, with an interest in opera singing or Western classical music.
Yeah.
Because
okay, so I'll tell you, this is one very strange thing. It's a very, very good question you've asked. Because what's happened is that you will find in Western orchestras also now, and in Western music, there are so many very, very good pianists, singers, musicians, violinists from Japan, Korea, China. I mean, they are at the top level, many of them, very many of them. Half the orchestras in Europe are people in Japan, Korea, China, and so on and so forth. Not Indians that many. One of the peculiar reasons we used to think was, why is that? Then I said the only reason can be we already have a very deep classical tradition, which many other cultures don't really have such a deep tradition. So maybe that is why. And then our traditions are very different. The Indian traditions are very different from the Western classical traditions. So that's one reason. But there are quite a few Indians who have also gone into Western classical music and doing very well. The example of Zubin Mehta is very well known. He's the best known of them all. But there are many young singers who are doing opera, learning opera in Delhi, in Mumbai, and a few other places. And many of the younger ones are now beginning to make a mark in the West also. Of course, they can't make a mark in India because we don't have a very elaborate system of performances in India of Western classical music. It's usually only visiting people who perform. Very few people perform. So performing opportunities for Western music and for opera are very little limited classical music in India. So that's why they can't make careers here. So therefore, many people don't go into it. But the ones who are passionate, a few people are going into it and they're doing very well indeed. Let me tell you that.
Maybe sir, it's because of the society's pressure that opera singing, is it not? It's not considered ideal. What can I say? Career or profession?
Yeah, that's definitely there. I mean, even for people who want to go into Indian classical music, their parents will say, "Hey, are you good enough? Can you make a career out of it? Do you want to study engineering or become a doctor or an accountant or something like that?"
Yes, sir. Yes.
That happens everywhere.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jasvi. Is that it? I think all the other questions have disappeared.
Yes, sir. So I think we're good to go now. Ikra, please take it forward.
Okay, so now I would like to call Honorable Director Sir to give a vote of thanks and yes, inspire the students.
Good evening, everybody. We had a lovely session with Mr. SUNIT TANDON ji explaining all the finer points and, exposing us and our children. Am I audible, please?
Yes.
Okay. I have been through this session for the past 45 minutes. I'm sorry I couldn't attend earlier. There was somebody who's come up. But I was so happy that there is something which our children are getting exposed to. And apart from the music, a lot of new words have entered their vocabulary today, thanks to Tandonji, sir. Things like symphony, things like opera, things like, polyphony and monophony, and the seeing the whole big orchestra performing, and also for the patience that they've developed in, going through this because of the wonderful presentation by SUNIT TANDON. So the children, I'm sure, have really gained today, because number one, first comes the word, the thought, and then comes things after that. So these new words, new thoughts, the exposure that has come to them, they will definitely appreciate the complexities of music, and their sensibilities will definitely be, more pronounced now. And on behalf of the whole school, on behalf of the Shardin family and the students, I thank you, SUNIT TANDON ji, for the wonderful evening, for the beautiful pleasure of music that we've been through, and of course for the painstaking effort you must have put into collecting these beautiful things and explaining it so well. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been my pleasure. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So let me inform you that this is first of all the series, and there will be more such lectures, come-downs. And thank you, Sunit sir. I'd like to thank you for giving your precious time today. I'd like to thank all the viewers present here, all the students and everybody who gave their precious time today. So the host institute, Shardin School, to be a part of this wonderful event. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you. Stay happy and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot. It was great fun, and I hope you keep on enjoying this music.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nilesh.
Bye.